Our bodies use C15 to make a metabolite called pentadecanoyl carnitine. And this metabolite we published back in 2022 is the second ever discovered full-acting endocannabinoid. So it fully activates CB1 and CB2. So we're like, oh.
So is it making them happier too?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
Because isn't that the runner's high stuff too? So like you feel like you get runner's high when you take this stuff? Or welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Longevity Roadmap. And today's very interesting interview, and it's going to be about a supplement or a drug or whatever you want to call it. But before we begin that, I want to just kind of give you my thoughts. You know, one of the things to remember about supplements is that they're still drugs, right? Anything that changes the chemistry in your body is a drug. So don't fall for that nonsense about, no, this one is natural. This one is, this isn't pharmaceutical. This is actually, a supplement, and therefore it is natural and it is not harmful. The only difference between what's coming from the pharmacy and what you're getting off the internet or in the aisles of a grocery store in the supplement section is that one is actually controlled and has some protections associated with it. Now, I know. We all hate big pharma, and that's the mantra in this space, but that's the truth. The pharmaceutical industry, at least, is controlled. The supplement industry is not. In fact, there was a study a few years back looking at common supplements off the shelf of a grocery store that showed that half the bottles didn't even contain the ingredients they claimed to. In other words, you were buying Ginkgo? No, you weren't. You were buying like something else. You were buying, pin. Who knows? By the way, if you're curious about ways to avoid that issue, one of the things that I actually really like, one of the sites which I can recommend to you is consumerlabs.com. I think it's a few bucks per month. But they also have some pretty interesting information on there. So if you're interested, even for a short period of time while you're trying to figure out what supplements you want to be on, check that out, consumerlabs.com. And what I like about it is it gives you sort of breakdown in any difference. Say you're looking at, you want to buy a certain brand of NR. You can go to the NR section and they test a bunch of different brands and you can test it for purity and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, okay, so that's quality control. But even before you get to quality control, I might suggest that for any particular supplement that you want to take, that you make sure you have a good reason to take it in the first place. I really don't think there is a benefit to taking like 100 different supplements. And, again, these are no different from drugs. When you take 100 different pills, especially like when they're not prescribed, you have no idea how they're going to interact with one another. There could be some dangerous implications to that. So I do take a fair number of supplements, but each one of them I have a reason for. So what I would suggest at least is having some kind of a framework for, the supplements that you take. The first rule being that if there's any significant risk to it, or if there is any downside associated with it, you probably shouldn't take it. What's the point, right? This is one of those sort of, it might help, but it certainly won't hurt type situations. That's when I think supplements are okay. But the second rule is have an actual reason for why you're taking it. Now, it's crazy when you watch, Dave Asprey and stuff, and it's like, how many different supplements are you going to take? I don't know if he actually takes them or just says he takes them or whatever, but if you actually counted the number, it's an insane amount, right? Like it's just not, and a lot of them are for the same thing. So one of the things I like to do is I like to have a specific, reason for each thing that I take. For example, I break down the biological processes of aging. And to me, the ones that we know about or that we theorize are a major part of the aging process are mitochondrial health, cellular senescence and autophagy, avoiding, epigenetic damage or epigenetic drift, and then chronic inflammation, So those are the things. So for example, with mitochondrial health, I take CoQ10 because of its role in autophagy. It's one of the reasons I take rapamycin. Epigenetic drift, well, I like to see if I can activate those sirtuins. So I take NR for that. No, a lot of these have multiple functions, but I'm just giving you an example. And then for inflammation, for example, I've taken curcumin in the past, and after the interview that I did today, I just added another supplement called C15. Okay. Now, C15 is a saturated fatty acid that helps your cells by basically strengthening their membranes, their outer walls. In short, when C15 becomes part of the cell membranes, it makes the cell membrane more tightly packed and resistant to damage from free radicals. The story that you're going to hear in the following interview that I did is pretty compelling, and that's why I tried this out. I think the data is pretty good too, and actually it kind of makes me wonder why more people aren't talking about it. So anyway, not that you should take it, but I'm just telling you that the interview that you'll be listening to shortly was convincing enough for me to give it a try. And so will it convince you? Well, find out right after these messages. Welcome back to Longevity Roadmap. This is Buck Joffrey, and today my guest is Dr. Stephanie Venn-Watson. She's a veterinary epidemiologist, entrepreneur, and scientist, and she's co-founder and CEO of Serafina Therapeutics, researching C15, which we'll talk about for healthy aging. She has founded biotech companies and worked with major health organizations, and she's authored the longevity nutrient about her. And I'm going to say, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but C15:0 research with over 60 publications and 40 plus patents. She has received recognition from the Department of Health and Human Services for her work in disease prevention and health promotion. Stephanie, nice to meet you and welcome to the show.
Buck, is wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be here.
So was I saying C15:0? Is that, I mean, how are we saying this?
I know, right? It's not your typical word that you're looking at. So it's C15. They make it nice and easy for you.
Okay. There's no zero? Because I have a colon zero.
But it is helpful to share with your audience that it is spelled C15:0. But from here on out, we'll just call it C15.
We'll just call it 15. Okay. Well, let's just jump into it because that's kind of your thing right now, right? You wrote a book on this, the longevity nutrient. What is C15? Why do you believe it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So C15 is an odd chain fatty acid. It's found in butter, is our primary source. And here was the big surprise. It's the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in over 90 years since omega-3. So a nutrient that our bodies must have certain levels of to not fall apart. And this discovery wonderfully came from taking good care of dolphins.
Interesting. And just to clarify, when you say essential fatty acid, what we're talking about is fatty acids that we can't make ourselves, are correct? And therefore we have to consume them.
That's exactly right. And in this case, our bodies can make some levels of C15. And we could, if we end up getting into it, some of the microbes in our gut are actually really good at making some C15, but really not enough to maintain very specific levels that we've discovered we need in order to keep ourselves strong and not fall apart. We need to get that C15 from our diet.
So what was the story behind the discovery?
Right. So there I was working for the Navy and was unexpectedly brought onto the Navy, recruited about 20 years ago to help continually improve the health and welfare of Navy dolphins. And so was very fortunate in which this population gets incredibly good care. Navy dolphins live out in San Diego Bay, go out to the open ocean every day. Every day they choose to come back. And as part of their really good care, Buck, what was happening was that Navy dolphins were living a lot longer than dolphins in the wild. Dolphins in the wild live to about 20. Dolphins at the Navy are living up to 50 years and beyond. Yeah. So
it's not just because they were getting eaten by things and
yeah, well, that too. They were protected against predators. For sure. Access to good health care, a protected environment, all of those certainly were helpful. But it did give us a chance to really kind of witness over a period of, the program has been around for 60 years. And so it gave us the opportunity to really watch dolphins get older. And, with the surprising finding that some of them were developing high cholesterol, chronic inflammation, arthritis, even fatty liver disease and Alzheimer's disease. So we were able to have, interestingly, we saw that some dolphins in this population, about 1 in 3, were developing these conditions while others were not. So that really gave us a great opportunity to figure out why.
How'd you figure it out?
How should we go? So it was a lot of this is luck, right? It was good timing. At the time, metabolomics was just coming into play, in which it was commercially available, where we were funded by Office of Naval Research to take archived serum from the dolphins, and we were able to use metabolomics to evaluate thousands of small molecules present in their blood, as well as their all-fish diet, to figure out which molecules predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And, Buck, we assumed it was going to be omega-3s since all they eat are fish. And lo and behold, what made the top of the list was a fatty acid I had never heard of, which was C15, or pentadecanoic acid, higher levels predicted the healthiest aging dolphins.
Can you explain, I think you referred to as
metabolomics.
Metabolomics. What is that process that you use? Like how do you do that?
Right. So luckily it wasn't me that we have. We're able to send to a third-party lab. And what metabolomics is, it's basically the ability, if you think about, your patients come to you and they get a full blood panel drawn, and let's say you'll test, 20 to 40 things on a panel. What this metabolomics enables us to do is they'll look not for those 20 to 40 molecules in the body, measurements of different molecules. They'll look at hundreds to thousands of small molecules that are present in the blood. It's basically like a huge blood panel that's looking for a lot of different things. And it provides this untargeted approach, right? So that we had the bias of omega-3s, but it really evaluated everything that really qualified as a small molecule present in dolphins' blood and ours, and to be able to look at which ones were higher versus lower.
So you were looking at basically the highest correlating molecule with longevity. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kickstarted. And to your point, all that told us at the time was association, not causation. So just saying, gosh, okay, the healthiest aging dolphins, those that were not getting insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, they had higher C15. So from there, we were then able to move C15 into the lab. Again, all of this under Navy funding, to say, hey, can C15 actually provide direct benefits? So we did 8 studies over 3 years to evaluate C15's mechanisms of action, its bioavailability, dose response, activities in cell-based systems, and even in vivo studies. And at the end of all of that resulted in our 2020 paper in Scientific Reports that showed not only was C15 an active and beneficial saturated fat, but that it met the criteria of being an essential fatty acid.
Interesting. And those experiments were done in what animals?
There were 2 models that were used. One was your typical obese mouse model. And if you think about it, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? So that this model is where mice are fed a high-fat diet to induce obesity and type 2 diabetes, including being high in saturated fats. So, Buck, the challenge was, could we take a mouse that was then given a high-fat diet, high-saturated fat diet, which caused disease, and then give it a saturated fat, C15, to reverse this disease process? And in that model, indeed, C15 lowered inflammation, key pro-inflammatory cytokines. It lowered glucose and cholesterol in these models. So that was the first in vivo model.
In the wild, one of the things of bringing me back to the dolphins here is, there was... you were looking which of these molecules were predicting the benefit. Presumably, these dolphins all had the same diet, though, right? So why did some have more C15 than others?
It's such a good question. So the dolphins have a choice of 5 different types of fish. And so they had capelin, squid, herring, I'm trying to think of a couple of the others that they have. And so they, based upon what they did at the Navy, what their tasking was, what they preferred, they chose different types of fish. Wonderfully, the Navy actually tracks exactly how much each dolphin gets of each fish type. And so when we went in and tested the different fish, we found that capelin, one of the most commonly used fish at the Navy at the time, had no C15 in it. So the more capelin and squid they got, the less C15 they had in their diet. Those dolphins that went heavy on mackerel and herring, which had more C15, had higher levels of C15 in their diet and their bodies.
So in terms of human foods, though, you said butter. Is this also something that, I mean, obviously people take fish oil for the omega-3s and that stuff. Are we getting this from fish or no?
Right. So for fish, there is C15 present in fish, but it varies a lot. And not just among, just like we found with the dolphins, different type of fish. It also differs by, like, for example, the season. So the warmer the waters, the less fat a fish has, and therefore the less C15 it has. More importantly, what we found was most C15 in fish is present in the skin and the heads of the fish, which dolphins eat the whole fish.
Yeah.
We tend to actually skirt the skin and the heads of fish.
Although, like in Asia, they seem to eat them, right?
And that is a really important point, because a big question we get is that for us on the Western side, by far, our primary source of C15 is from dairy fat. But then the question is, well, what about a lot of Asian countries? Milk and dairy is not a big part of the diet. Their primary source is exactly to your point, Buck. Their primary source is fish, at least in the old diets, right? That used to be traditional, where you eat the whole fish. That's happening less and less with new generations.
What more do we know about C15 in humans? Like, what do we know about, has there been studies in the way of looking at C15, maybe an epidemiological, any kind of studies, at least dissociative studies done similar to like something with the dolphins, or not yet?
Oh, yeah. So there's so much now. So there are now, wonderfully, the rest of the world has been working on C15 around the same time, and definitely since we made that discovery in 2020. And all of those peer-reviewed studies, over 100 of them from prestigious groups throughout the world, are available at discoverc15.com. And that is just a pure place to put all things C15 and the peer-reviewed studies. So what's really impressive about C15, and the reason why Dr. Nick Shork, who's the leader of NIH's Longevity Consortium, Nick was at the ARDD, which is one of the largest anti-aging drug meetings in the world. He was at ARDD this last year, and he shared that C15 has more data supporting its role as a longevity molecule than any other longevity candidate to date. So I'll start with that.
Even rapamycin?
Even rapamycin. And the reason why is gets to your question. There are not only robust epidemiological studies in humans, there are multiple meta-analyses, so studies of prospective cohort studies, repeatedly showing that, just like the dolphins, the higher the C15 that people have in their blood, the lower their risk of developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, specifically coronary heart disease and heart failure, certain types of cancer, as well as fatty liver disease. So there's lots of data showing this association.
But where are we getting it, though? Because when I think about, what you mentioned, butter, I mean, listen, I think our understanding of fats is different than it was at one point. And, but still the idea of this molecule that is potentially more geroprotective than rapamycin, our primary source is butter. It just, there's something about that like doesn't work in my head. So maybe you can kind of,
Yeah, I
you
can
know,
help you there.
yeah,
I can help you there. So, yes, the story on fats has been changing. However, for the general and because you're super savvy, you're knowledgeable, your listeners have been like following and understanding
yeah,
the latest trends, right? But still, in general, population wide, people are actively avoiding not just whole fat milk and butter, things like butter, but like whole fat milk is just a daily of food. They're avoiding cow's milk altogether, right? So there's been this big movement to plant-based milks that have no C15 in it. And so population wide, really since the late 1970s, our C15 levels have been declining. Where you have things like pediatric recommendations that are still saying that, in fact, it was as late as the 1990s. That's when really the movement away from whole fat milks hit infants, where the recommendation was once a child turns 2 years old, they should move away from whole fat milks and head to, go on to low fat or 1% milks. And then, just us as a population continue to avoid whole fats. From the industry's perspective, we now know that cows fed grass have twice as much C15 than cows fed corn. So even if you're eating whole butter and whole fat milk, it may not have the C15 levels that it had, industry wide 50 years ago.
what's thought to be sort of the mechanism of action? And I guess this goes into, you mentioned that there's less inflammation, less diabetes, so I guess the question is this is this a glucose regulator? Is this an anti-inflammatory? Is there something inherently geroprotective where it's activating various pathways that we know are involved with longevity? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
To all of them. Okay.
So what we now know, thanks to the work we've been doing, but as well as of lots of others now, we do know that C15 is a pleiotropic molecule. So it has multiple mechanisms of action. One of the core roles that C15 plays, which is really unique, is that as a saturated fatty acid that has no double bonds, it is particularly sturdy and it is resistant to lipid peroxidation. So it's the double bonds in the fatty acid structures that are the reason why polyunsaturated fatty acids are oils and why they can get attacked by oxygen and become rancid. Saturated fatty acids, C15, have no double bonds. So when they go naturally, we eat it, it goes into our cell membrane. It serves a protective role in our cell membrane of preventing against lipid peroxidation and keeping the cells strong. So much so that it fits into this theory that A.J. Holbert put out in 2005 called the cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging. And what he showed was when you looked at mammals, those with the most saturated fats in their cell membranes had the longest lifespans. And he was able to show that by having stronger fatty acids in your cell membrane as a mammal, the lower your lipid peroxidation and the longer you live. How and why humans and dolphins live longer than mice.
Where does the pacemaker part get in?
The pacemaker goes by as far as the more saturation you have, the longer. It was a linear association between how much saturation you have in your fatty acids in your cell membrane and the duration of your lifespan. So he was able to show that would drive basically how long you live.
So alternatively, obviously, we're calling this geroprotective potentially. What is the consequence of deficiency of C15? Is there evidence that might accelerate aging?
In order to be an essential fatty acid, there should be a deficiency, right? Otherwise, it's not really essential.
Right.
So if we have low levels of it, there should be the presence of a deficiency. And to be honest, the omega-3s, the two omega-3s that are the omega-3 and omega-6 that are the other two essential fatty acids, you're a little hard-pressed to actually find a nutritional deficiency syndrome, like when we think of vitamin C deficiency in scurvy and vitamin D deficiency in rickets. What we have discovered over, again, the work of the world over the past 10 years, and we published in Metabolites last year, is the presence of a C15 deficiency syndrome called cellular fragility syndrome. So just like we were talking about the cells being stronger, it needs at least 0.2% of total fatty acids in our cell to have enough bricks in our cell membrane to keep it strong. When we have less than that amount of C15 in our cell membranes, our cells weaken and they're susceptible to lipid peroxidation and a whole pathophysiology that leads to iron deposition, iron overload, the onset of fatty liver disease and NASH, and then subsequent iron overload throughout the body. Interestingly, when we found this phenotype and pathophysiology that occurred in the dolphins, the same year, which was 2012, multiple scientists at the University of Columbia published a paper on the discovery of an entirely new way that our cells were dying called ferroptosis. And ferroptosis, since that discovery, has had 10,000 papers published on ferroptosis. We know all kinds of things about this new form of cell death, except for why did it show up out of nowhere? So what we now know is that C15 deficiencies cause this new form of cell death called ferroptosis, which then results in a string of effects that we were lucky in which the dolphins, it was a very clean presentation. And when you go back to humans, we're now seeing it present in about 1 in 3 people.
What is
with these
ferroptosis? What's the big deal? How's it different from like the usual way cells die, which would be apoptosis?
Right. We're used to apoptosis, necrosis, and autophagy, right? Or the 3 ways our cells die. So it was pretty surprising to find a 4th. So specifically how they described this cell death is that our fatty acids in our cell membrane become fragile. It increases lipid peroxidation. And at the same time, they started seeing abnormal free iron deposition inside of these cells. You could physically see the iron inside the cells. And when you combine lipid peroxidation with this free iron, it then resulted in massive production in reactive oxygen species, which then takes out the mitochondria. So it's a very unique phenotype of a cell death where when you look at it under the microscope, it's thickened cell membranes, an intact nucleus, little pieces of iron, and the mitochondria are all dead. So
are there any known diseases, to your knowledge, that sort of are characterized by some of that pathology?
We saw this in the dolphins, now present in humans, that a lot of the issues it really starts with the red blood cells. So the red blood cells become fragile because of, now we know, because of the lack of C15. Those fragile red blood cells then get engulfed by macrophages in the liver called Kupffer cells. And when the liver takes out, that's its whole job for these Kupffer cells is to take out these, malfunctioning red blood cells and recycle the iron. But when you have a lot of malfunctioning red blood cells, weak red blood cells, you then get lots of red blood cells getting engulfed by the liver, and the corpses of the red blood cells that are left behind are iron. So over a period of time, you now get iron overload, and that is specific. When you look under the microscope, the iron is specifically inside these Kupffer cells. It's not in the hepatocytes, not in the external tissue. So it's kind of a giveaway of what's happening. And once that iron starts accumulating in the liver, now you're set up for what's called dysmetabolic iron overload syndrome, or DIOS, which is a disease that has been on the rise in humans that then spills over into the body. If, given the progression of time, that iron overload then starts seeding the heart, the brain. And so we're seeing, if you look up, go to Google Scholar and you look at iron overload and cognition, heart disease, liver disease, all of a sudden we have this quiet pandemic that's been happening. That is, everyone's been kind of like seeing it happen, but not understanding, why am I seeing hyperferritinemia in my patients, and what is going on? And we now know, thanks to the dolphins, of what this phenotype is.
Do we have any kind of randomized controlled trial in humans yet looking at the benefits potentially of supplementation?
We do. So it was, when we first reported fatty liver disease and iron overload in the dolphins, I was reached out to by Dr. Jeffrey Schwimmer, who is one of the leading gastroenterology, pediatric gastroenterologists, a leader in children's fatty liver disease. And in fact, he opened up the first fatty liver disease clinic for kids in the world. Jeff somehow had picked up on this paper, which was published in the Journal of Wildlife Diseases. So not what you all are.
Yeah.
You're not all reading the last Journal of Wildlife Diseases. But Jeff had found this paper and he reached out to me and he's like, I don't think fatty liver disease that you're seeing in dolphins is the same that we're talking about in people. But why don't you send me some dolphin liver slides and let me take a peek because this is curious.
Yeah.
And so he looked at the slides. He came back and he said, we are a go. He goes, this is the exact same presentation. So that started Jeff Schwimmer on. He then did a large study in which he had 237 kids scanned for fat in the liver, and he measured C15 in their blood and also looked at C15 in their diet. And what he showed was the higher the C15 in the diet and their blood, the lower the fat in their liver. So with that, he then did a randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial to say, gosh, what if I supplement graduates from my program, so young adults, 18 to 24 years old with a history of fatty liver disease, supplement them with C15, and let's see what happens. And what he found, this was published last year, first of all, 2 out of 3 of this population had what was defined as a C15 deficiency. So they had below 0.2% C15 in their blood. For the ones who took the supplement and got up and over that threshold, they saw decreases in both ALT and AST, which was wonderful, right? In just 12 weeks.
They were statistically
significant, exactly, decreases. And interestingly, he saw an increase in their hemoglobin. So we were surprised to see in such a young population this first component of the syndrome that we're talking about, right, which is fragile red blood cells. So he didn't do the full red blood cell panel, so we don't know about red blood cell distribution with osmotic fragility testing, but this demonstration that they saw raised hemoglobin paired with decreased liver enzymes, of course, statistically significantly, was really compelling in 12 weeks. And he did not see that in the placebo-controlled group.
So what's interesting is I'm sure you know, there's this huge rise in the last decade or more of fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty steatosis, NASH. And the thought is, I think a lot of people, the conventional wisdom is that it's largely due to ultra-processed foods, also, metabolic dysfunction from too much fructose and too much sugar, basically, and metabolic dysfunction. Are you of the opinion that this could be sort of the thing that we're not looking at that might actually have a bigger role in this rise in NASH?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and that's what, when Jeff reached out, he's like, wait a second. So dolphins started getting, because we didn't see this syndrome in dolphins until, it was probably the early 2000s. And so it also kind of showed up on the dolphins' doorstep. And Jeff was like, wait a second. He's like, this is flipping his entire approach on its head for the exact same reasons you just said, which is like, dolphins don't eat sugar. It's not ultra-processed foods.
Yeah.
It's not trans fat. So it's not saying that C15 deficiencies are the only cause of fatty liver disease, but there seems to be clearly a sizable phenotype of a sizable number of people who have this dolphin phenotype of fatty liver disease. Interestingly, the dolphins, while we were have been decreasing our milk milk fat intake.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Is like, it makes you want to look at a graph comparing the time horizon in which we, as a culture, we started eliminating or talking bad about whole whole milk, and look at that compared to the rise in fatty liver disease and see if there's a correlation.
Yeah. I mean, if it's, when we know that it was really 1977, Congress came out with recommendations, which is, again, kind of mind-blowing, thinking that it was Congress who came out
Yeah.
with these national recommendations
Yeah.
that said specifically, let's avoid fat, let's avoid butter, specifically butter and whole fat milk. 1980 is when Mayo Clinic published the first 30 cases of fatty liver disease that was not attributed to alcoholism.
Oh.
And then now present in 1 and 3. So when Jeff when he and he had that exact same question, and he graphed it out, had his students graph it out, and he's like, oh my gosh, like, this is fixable. Like, this is, and for us with the dolphins were previously eating eulachon fish, which were really fatty. They're so fatty, they're called candlefish. That eulachon fisheries just went dry. It completely, so the fish were gone. So then that's when the Navy moved to capelin, which was a non-fat fish. And we kind of had this parallel at the same time Navy dolphins were moving to a basically low-fat, low C15 fish. We were moving to low-fat, diets. And so at the same time that dolphins were developing fatty liver disease, all of a sudden the same thing was happening in humans.
So, my question, I'm listening to you, and you basically have answered, even down to the randomized control trial. And what I can't figure out here is, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? Like, I mean, not that I'm like, that I'm, the guy who knows the most, but I'm knee deep in this stuff every day. And I have never heard of C15. And, I've had so many conversations about rapamycin, and there's so many conversations about metformin and, the TAME trial and everything like that. And so why do you think that is? I mean, what's the deal here? Is this just too new? Like, or what?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely new science, right? This is not something that's being taught in medical schools yet. Our goal is obviously to change all of this. We've brought on, some of the strongest leaders, the biggest skeptics, right? It's over. And this has been really 10 years of understanding aging dolphins, and then 10 years of doing science on C15 funded by the Navy. And we have a lot of blinders up, like not you, but the world. And you even look at USDA nutritional guidelines today's guidelines, it has 164 pages. It mentions avoiding saturated fats 161 times. So when you talk about a dolphin veterinarian, right, making this discovery, even though it's co-published with Dr. Ed Dennis, this longevity paper where we put C15 head to head against rapamycin and metformin, under showing that C15 targets 6 hallmarks of aging, it activates AMPK, it inhibits mTOR, it does all the things, and that was co-authored with Nick Short. We're at the point now where the scientific community is starting to obviously get involved because all of these papers, but almost everything I have shared with you has been published within the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So the goal here, because of the urgency, and there was a second clinical trial as well, which similarly in humans done in Singapore, showing again, similarly, people with fatty liver disease had benefits above and beyond a hypocaloric and Mediterranean diet, in which they added C15 and showed a lower LDL cholesterol and improvement in the gut microbiome. So It's all so fresh. So wonderfully, Simon & Schuster reached out and they said, this is a book. This is a movement. We want to help you get it going. So we wrote the book. And then that's, the longevity nutrient. And that hopefully this and conversations like this with you will help be like, we have to be talking about this.
Yeah. For sure. Now, if people are hearing this, and some people are starting to think, well, okay, where do I get this stuff, and how much should I supplement? Like, what is there? Is it a common supplement? Are there various brands that are more reliable? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and to be completely transparent, when we were funded by the Navy, and not just to understand, why do some dolphins get these diseases and others don't, to then discover it with C15, but we were funded by the Navy then to develop a supplement for the dolphins. So to be able to get them back,
Yeah.
it ends up that there's this spin out benefit, right, to human health too. So the discovery was made at the Navy. And so the Navy, has this, patented the ability to use C15 for all of these benefits. So they trusted me and my husband, a Navy physician, we're a military family, to go do what you're supposed to do in the military, which is like identify the problem, find a way to fix it, and then fix it. So we developed Fatty 15, which is a pure C15 free fatty acid bioavailable supplement ingredient and supplement. And it's the exact same ingredient molecule that's used in all these studies we talked about. And we, it is a moral obligation for us to bring this to the world. We've been given the honor and the duty to do so. And so the first step is through Fatty 15 is the pure C15 supplement. And we're now, Buck, looking toward, our first step, our first goal is credibility. So 10 years of science on C15 to kind of get you to where we got in this conversation, which is like, wait, all the boxes are checked off. What are we waiting for? The second is awareness. So our conversation, the book are a part of that. And the third pillar is accessibility. So the supplement is wonderful. We have 95% monthly retention rates. People are feeling better. They're seeing benefits because this is a pure, well-tested molecule. And then with regard to accessibility, our next step is like, how do we bring this to the world? And the best way to do that is as an ingredient in foods. And now a lot of really fascinating work being done on infants. And that if mom is C15 deficient, so is her milk. Therefore, baby becomes C15 deficient, and studies showing that children who get lower C15 have poorer body growth and poorer cognitive development. So working to let's help with longevity from day one.
What I see it on Amazon, so it's easy to get. In those studies, in the randomized control studies, what was the dosing that was used that seemed beneficial?
So we recommend 100 to 200 milligrams per day. It kind of gets us back to where we were supposed to be. We're supposed to get through our diet. The limitations of diet is that, whole fat foods, if you look at milk fat, there are over 300 fatty acids in milk fat. Only 1% of that is C15. 40% of the fats in milk fat are pro-inflammatory fats. So this pure C15 is when we're able to get 100 to 200 milligrams, that's 1 to 2 capsules per day. That should get most people up and over, because most of us are just sitting right on that baseline of deficiency, get us up and over that deficiency line to support our long-term health. These clinical trials, because they were with people that had a condition, that had fatty liver disease, started as C15 deficient. The one with Dr. Jeff Schwimmer was 200 milligrams a day for 12 months, and the one in Singapore was 300 milligrams a day. So they were really trying to push higher to say, gosh, we're starting with the diseased population for our supplement. Of course, we're hoping to keep healthy people healthy.
Yeah. Well, fascinating stuff. And you're saying you've had people who actually can noticeably feel like they're actually feeling better from this, huh?
Yeah, I tell you, it was just a delight and surprise, because we're like, this is long-term benefits.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while. And we have on the Fatty 15 website, there's a review. We have over 5,000 reviews of people, most enthusiastic, clearly things we've talked about, improved liver health and glucose and metabolic health. One of the delights and surprises were that people are reporting 74% within 16 weeks, reporting deeper sleep, calmer mood. And I thought, wait, this is placebo. like,
Yeah.
this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But since then, what we did discover, again, going back to the dolphins,
Yeah.
is that our bodies use C15 to make a metabolite called pentadecanoyl carnitine. And this metabolite we published back in 2022 is the second ever discovered full-acting endocannabinoid. So it fully activates CB1 and CB2.
Oh.
So we're like, oh. And
So
I
is it
started-
making them happier too?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Because isn't that the runner's high stuff too?
Yeah.
Isn't so
Yeah.
like you feel like you get runner's high when you take this stuff? Or
Yeah, it's more like, well, people will report like, I have better energy. Definitely, I'm sleeping better. For me, it was less joint pain and sleeping
Yeah.
better.
Well,
And I was like,
that's, yeah.
why is it doing this? And now we understand,
Yeah.
oh, endocannabinoids. That
do you split your dose or do you take it?
I do. I take 2 in the morning.
Yeah. Interesting. Absorbability's fine.
100%.
Yeah,
It's 100%. And there are 2 very large clinical trials done in humans, in kids, even people with cystic fibrosis. And it showed that this free fatty acid form of C15 is 100% bioavailable, which is just incredible.
Well, listen, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. And again, the book is Fatty 15. No,
The book,
the supplement is Fatty 15.
That's right.
The book is the longevity nutrient.
Yep,
And,
it's called I
Yeah.
think I even have a copy of it maybe around here, called the longevity nutrient. Here we go. And it's out, Simon & Schuster, and available on March 25th. But it's on for pre-sale now, even on Amazon where you just were. So
Fantastic.
yeah. It's
Great talking to you.
It's a fun read because it's like it was a whole detective story of 10 years of science and what was happening all around the world. And it also, because it has tips on like what kind of foods to eat and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, love to have you on again when you have more to report.
Oh, there's more coming. I'll tell you that. And we might be talking brain health.
Sounds good. Well, that makes sense too. All right.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Buck. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. A quick reminder that while I am in fact a surgeon, nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Now make sure to include your physician in any medical decisions you make. And also, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure to show your support with a like, share, or subscribe.